Welcome back to Becoming. My name is Nick Slater. Today on the show, the very talented Liv Kaplan. Liv is a nutritionist and content creator. In fact, you might have seen her on TikTok where she's amassed over 800,000 followers who come to Liv for her very straightforward and practical approach to cooking and nutrition. Liv is all about the whole foods and one ingredient foods and how we should be eating as close to nature as possible. This was a wonderful chat and we cover everything from the link between what we eat and our mental well-being, how our food has a certain energy and why we should eat high-vibe foods. We talk about seed oils, which alt milks to use, and what we can eat to have better sleep. This was a masterclass in nutrition and I'm so grateful for Liv for coming on and sharing her value. So please sit back, enjoy Becoming Liv Kaplan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
What drew me to your content is the simplicity in your approach to nutrition. You don't measure calories, you advise against shopping in the health food aisle, you're low carb. But before we do dive into that philosophy, what first inspired you to go down this path of holistic nutrition?
I think it's something that's always been in me, even from a very young age. And when I was young, sort of age 13, 14, health wasn't as popular as it is now and as normal. Like I was a bit of a weirdo for being interested. But I think from even that age, maybe it was something I inherited and maybe it was just how my parents raised me. I'm not quite sure. It just is how I am.
Were your parents big cooks?
Normal, yeah. My mum always cooked. And my dad, I would say, was very progressive and he always taught me about the power of the mind. So much of the stuff that he used to teach me when I was younger is now like, what's all in the best, biggest spirituality and personal development books, which he just kind of inherently knows. So
he was an OG meditator.
Yeah. But I think from the very, at such a young age, I saw a benefit. So it's kind of that positive feedback loop. I was like, okay, if I do this, whether it was changing a thought or eating a certain thing or not eating a certain thing, I feel better. And it was just as simple as that. Like it's nothing complex and I was very motivated to feel good.
That's very aware at that age.
Yes.
And so you said you feel better. Was that mentally or physically or both?
Mentally, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And did you notice any foods in particular were responsible for making you feel better?
Not at that age. I think I definitely had an interest in food and healthy food. But this was like 15 years ago or more. It was a very different landscape as to what we know.
Crazy.
And that was very much a low fat era, which is like very different to how I eat now and how I feel good on. It was very much calorie counting for girls. It was very much like you have to be skinny. There was like no talk of being strong or body positivity at all. It was like you're only worthy if you're skinny. Like that was what we consumed in media. So I think while I had the intention, I probably didn't have access to healthy information, but I got there in the end.
Yeah.
I went on the journey. So yeah.
What's your favorite thing to cook these days? I know your desserts, they look amazing. They go incredibly well on TikTok. Is that your favorite thing to cook?
My favorite, yeah, I think desserts probably just because it's creative. But it's not the thing that I cook the most often. I think I honestly just regular like breakfast, lunch and dinner, like the kind of boring everyday things is probably, I guess I've made myself enjoy it because that is my life and I make sure I try to cook as much as possible and eat as much from scratch stuff as possible. So yeah, just the regular boring food.
Actually, we'll dive into your day on a plate later on. But first I'd love to talk about your food philosophy, which is about whole foods. It's about one ingredient foods. How would you summarize that?
Most of the time, choosing simple whole foods as close to nature as possible. That is kind of how I describe it. And if you can do that most of the time, which like you said, I say one ingredient foods because I think it's the easiest way to kind of like, I guess, cull out some of the other stuff. If the majority of the time you're having one ingredient foods, which is really fruit, vegetables, grains, legumes, meat, olive oil, nuts, seeds. That's it. If your diet is made up of that most of the time, regardless of whether you're low carb, vegan, anything, you're eating what I say is you're probably eating better than like 90% of the population.
You're ticking the boxes.
Yeah, and it's really as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we get so many conflicting messages with nutrition, but really want to do it well, it just needs to be basic.
Totally. And I'm all for the kind of the biohacking and all the really like cool stuff and manipulating food to kind of feel a certain way or change your energy levels. I'm all for all of that. I think food is so powerful. But the way I say it is that that's like it's like the cherry on top. Once you've kind of got yourself to a stage where you're always picking and shopping for whole foods, which can take a bit of time and like a bit of a routine to get into, then you play with like medicinal mushrooms and fasting and different kinds of carbohydrate levels and do all of that. Like that's all good to do, but that's the last chunk.
That's the next step. Yeah, I think I'm approaching that step. The biggest thing for me has just been cooking as many meals at home as you can, because after a while you find that it's easier than you think. I think people think cooking needs to be this huge thing where you follow a recipe from a book, but you can throw 4 ingredients in a pan or in the oven and you've got yourself a really nutrient-dense meal. Do you think that part, the cooking at home, is really essential to eat well?
Yeah, that's exactly why I do what I do, because I think, unfortunately, cooking is a bit of a dying art. And there's a bit of a kind of perception around it that, yeah, it takes hours and it's complicated and hard. And if you haven't grown up ever cooking, it is hard, like any new thing that you have to do. But I hope that if we can like sort of bring back how that just being a part of life, you know, I think that would be really change people's health. And I'm all for like simple, really small things that actually change the way you eat. So one of those is cooking at home. Like it's not overcomplicated. It's not like, oh, I've got to do this diet and this enforce and all this stuff. It's like, oh, I'll just change that. And then naturally you eat way better. So that's kind of like an easier way to change instead of this crazy set of rules.
And it's often quicker than ordering takeaway. You can make a meal in 20 minutes and cheaper. You feel better. If someone wants to start cooking at home, where do they start?
When you're building a meal, which then goes into kind of building a week and then building your shopping list or whatever that is, get your proteins. So, of course, if you eat meat, like get your beautiful eggs, go for pasture-raised if you can, and any other meat and fish and chicken that you like, preferably grass-fed, organic, all those things if you can. Then have your pantry staples, which would be your grains and legumes if you have that, and sometimes canned things like coconut cream, canned tomatoes, just to make quick meals easier.
Okay.
And then everything else is fresh produce. And like, that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
You mentioned organic. It's becoming more and more popular. How important do you think it is to eat organic and to source that quality food?
I do think it's important, but I think it depends where people are in their journey. Like if you're still eating like the conventional way or lots of takeaway or you can't cook, you probably don't need to fuss too much. Like just learn to kind of eat those one ingredient whole foods, which is new for a lot of people. Then start to think about that. Where I'd say it's probably most important is animal foods. If you are going to consume them, I think there's a big difference both for the environment and for your health.
Really?
Between the different kind of scales of how animals are raised. And thinking, unfortunately, it is more expensive though. So I always will acknowledge that. Like I wish it wasn't the case, but it is. But I always love this quote that says, when things are cheap, they are so because someone else has paid the price.
Yes, right.
And I like to add, or something else has paid the price, which is your health or the environment or the animals themselves. So that's how I like to think about things. And I think even though there's no dollar for dollar, like you probably will save on your health outcomes later on and your longevity. And like that's priceless. So
yeah, you can either spend that money on the hospital in 50 years' time or you can buy organic at the moment.
Yes, exactly.
You mentioned earlier you started going down this path to benefit your mental health. How much of your food consideration these days is to benefit your mental well-being?
Probably all of it. Yeah. I think mental health is so unbelievably important to me because I almost feel like if I don't have that, I don't have anything. Which I probably say is probably true for a lot of people. Like I'm just not the type who can like push through and, you know, my motivator I always say is waking up feeling good. and feeling happy to be alive and excited for the day ahead. And like that is my metric for everything. I'm like, do I feel good in the morning? And this is not kind of an overly toxic positive thing of like, of course I acknowledge the ups and downs of life, but I'm like, even in the downs, I'm like, but do I feel good? You know, and it might sound crazy to think like that at the time. And I can go, yeah, and I know I'm doing everything I can to control that, I suppose. So yeah, I still would say the way that I live and the foods that I choose to eat and the way that I prioritize my health, I'd probably say it's 100% mental health.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you found since going down this journey and becoming more aware and disciplined with your choices, and when you start realizing how good you can feel, you become more cognizant of when you're not feeling good, I'm speaking from experience because, you know, I did a month without drinking and I'm improving my nutrition. It's almost like when I've realized just how good I can feel, now when I do have a drink or I do eat some shit food, I notice it more because the ceiling has been raised. Do you find that as well?
Absolutely, 100%. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just overly sensitive.
Me too.
Because I'm like, I look at other people and I'm like, I just could not live that way. Like I would be in a deep, dark hole, like never coming out of my room. Which is maybe some element of it. Like some people are less sensitive than others. But I certainly would argue for a lot of people, they probably haven't experienced like that really vibrant way of health, that maybe they just don't know any different.
Yeah. With the alcohol thing for me, it was like almost like you've got this cloud of fog over you, and until you stop drinking, you realize that it's gone and it evaporates. And you mentioned you haven't been drinking for 2 years.
Yeah. I never was a big drinker. I think, like I said, I've always been interested in my health, but I was also a teenager and went to uni just like everyone else. So I certainly had my experiences. But as time went on, maybe it was like approaching 30 as well, and now being 30, I just kind of like dropped so much stuff that I feel like I pretended to like in my early to mid 20s, and alcohol was one of them.
That's
like,
great. Yeah.
I think I definitely did. There was an element of me that thought it was cool, you know, which is like crazy that still affected me because I'm a pretty like confident person who likes to do what I like to do. But there was definitely an element of like I saw girls like, you know, out at wine bars and all this stuff, and I used to do it with my friends a lot. And I still go to those places with my friends. I just don't drink. And I kind of like pretended to like it, or like, you know, this idea of like enjoying a red with your partner, which I'm not discounting if someone has that enjoyment because a lot of people do. I just didn't, but I was pretending to. And then slowly, by process of elimination, I just started to like flick off the things that like, I was like, if I'm being honest with myself, I don't enjoy this. I don't know why I'm doing it, but it's not because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
So alcohol was one of those things which 2 years ago, I was like, okay, I'm like, finally, I knew it was coming for a while. And I got married a few months ago, and I always said, for some reason, even as a young girl, I said I would never drink at my wedding. I don't know why. I just was like, I don't want to feel drunk.
You were such a wise 13-year-old.
And then I think as my wedding approached, I was like, I think I am actually just going to give it up now. Like, you know, so that was that. But I didn't kind of place any like rules on myself. I said, I'm just not going to drink until I really feel like I want one, which over that 4 years ended up being 4 times.
Okay.
No, sorry, 2 years ended up being 4 times. Like a couple of times when I was in Greece away, and then other 2 times we were at a wedding when I was like, yeah, wouldn't mind a margarita at the moment. So it was like, which also felt really good because I wasn't like, I can't drink. And like, I'm always like, I think it's really important not to force with health stuff. It's like, what would this look like if it were easy? And so I never felt that pressure of like, I really want to, but I can't. I'm worried about this social interaction. It always gave me the power and the choice in any situation where I knew if I wanted one, I could have one. But I was like, majority of the time, I was like, it was also a bit of an experiment because I was like, I want to see when I actually do feel that and when I just drink because everyone else is drinking, which ended up being most of the case.
That's great. Yeah.
So, and then I just didn't, and then it just became normal and my friends knew and there was no
pressure.
No.
To deal with that initial surprise of my mates going, why aren't you drinking? I would just buy a non-alcoholic beer, and after 5 minutes, everyone, including myself, would forget that there's no alcohol in it. And those substitutes are really good because for me, and maybe it sounds like with the wine bar for you, most of the fun was just the occasion of going there with your friends and getting dressed up and doing something a bit different. You can still enjoy that if you have a non-alcohol drink.
Totally. And being such a foodie, like for me, I still always enjoy the food.
Yeah, of course.
So I was like, I'm not going there to do nothing. Like we get beautiful food and sit in a nice restaurant, and I just didn't feel like I need the alcohol. Yeah.
But under 30 is great for just cleaning up those parts of your life that no longer serve you.
Exactly.
We've touched on mental well-being, and I know that a lot of your recipes are gut focused on gut health. How important is it for us to eat with consideration to that gut-brain barrier and how pivotal our gut health is for our mental well-being?
Yeah, so the gut has a huge effect on our mental health. And that's just this one sort of element of now this movement towards holistic well-being, which you're now even seeing kind of in more conventional medical circumstances. There's more of an acknowledgement of holistic well-being, which is good. There's still a long way to go with that.
Right, yeah.
But people that are saying like, oh yeah, your gut health does make a difference to your mental health now are not total quacks. They're just like, they're like, oh, there's some acknowledgement that there is some connection there. So, and that's what I like to think with this stuff. Like, I think a lot of the conventional wisdom is that there's this like single cause and single outcome with health especially, which is just not the case. So your gut is totally central to your well-being, to everything. So it's kind of obvious that yes, it is going to affect your mental health and it is directly connected to your brain. It's also the first kind of like the first touch point of what we consume like to the rest of our body. Like we eat whatever we want to eat, whether that's good or bad, and our gut just has to deal with it. It's got to decide what's there, what shouldn't be there, where things should go, how to digest it. It's got to take the blood sugar into the blood. And so, yeah, it's just one of those things, like when it comes to holistic well-being, it's a really important factor to look after your gut. Unfortunately, I don't think there is like a very clear, like, oh, take this probiotic and then you'll have good gut health. It's so highly complex.
Right.
Like we've got all this bacteria and all sorts of things going on in our gut, all these nerve endings. So I think the best thing to come back to with that is just to eat whole foods.
Right.
It's a large portion of like why I've come to that sort of philosophy about eating whole foods as close to nature as possible. I'm not going to say eat this one food and it'll be great for your gut health, which is what you'll see a lot in like the marketing of supplements and products. And they're like, gut health supplement. And I'm like, that's not really true.
Yes. And is it right that there's so many different types of probiotics? One person might need a certain type and another might need another.
Yeah. And even single ingredients like bone broth is incredible for the gut. But it's not to say that if you drink bone broth, you'll suddenly have this perfect gut health. It just like doesn't work that way. So I like to come back to like, what are we doing majority of the time? Stress is a huge factor on the gut. Like, and that's seen in our language as well. Like when we're nervous, we get butterflies, and a lot of people have physical digestive changes from being nervous or stressed or anxious. Like that is quite literally the manifestation of like our gut and our brain talking to each other and being affected. So, your stress is a huge factor as well. So even if you're eating the best, most organic whole foods on the planet, if your stress levels are out of control, you're going to have all sorts of health problems, physical health problems. So yeah, that's a big way of saying that like the gut is really important, and it's an example of how important our daily well-being is.
Right. It's funny that we coined that term, trust your gut, before gut health was really known. And it just goes to show how instinctual it is that our gut's really important.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of sayings like that. Like butterflies is one of those.
Yeah.
Trust your gut. All those things, really interesting. Like it is in our language. Yeah.
Was eliminating sugar for you difficult? It doesn't sound like it would have been because you've always been quite healthy, or how was that journey for you?
I would say it was interesting because I've always been a healthy eater in terms of I've always tried with the information that I've had at the time. I've always tried to eat the best that I can. But when I did start to learn about sugar, which was sort of when I was at university, so like 10 years ago, I was surprised that despite that, I was still having a lot of sugar.
Right.
So like by the kind of wisdom at the time, which was more close to this like calorie fiber kind of what is seen to be like old school now and low fat, what happens is the sugars all the time because no one cares about the sugar. And I remember like, especially with a lot of like the diet language that I had at the time, which was being 19 at university.
Yeah.
It was all about calories. So I remember like, and I lived in a house of 9 girls when I was at uni.
Wow.
So everything went down. But I remember like it was a thing that you would have Chupa Chups as like a dessert because it was like a very low amount of calories and would last forever.
Right.
Now a Chupa Chup is like terrible for you because it's just pure sugar. It sits on your teeth and like rots them. But that was like what was seen as that that's like a good option because it's like, you know, and I was learning nutrition at the time and that was even, so I remember there was a dietitian that once recommended Freddo Frogs because they were like a calorie controlled dessert.
Because they've got low calories and disregarding the ingredients.
And it's in a packet as well. So you like supposedly, you know, will have one, but the reality is people don't with sugar. Like it's very addictive. Doesn't matter if it's in a packet, like you can't stop. So
I saw someone advocating on, as a content creator, he was saying, look, you can have avocado and eggs or you can have this Nutella on toast and this has more calories, so it doesn't really matter. I was like,
I have huge issues with that. I try not to get into like social media wars and stuff. So I just like don't follow those people and I just turn off or like go not interested if it ever comes across my thing. But it certainly makes me disappointed that like some people are going to consume that and think that that's true. But it just pushes me more to create the content that I do to show an alternative in a nice, gentle way that you don't need to measure oil. You don't need to do all these things. So yeah, my journey to quitting sugar, if you want to call it that, I would say it was interesting and surprising because I was like, oh, I actually am eating sugar, but I'm eating still what is considered healthy. And it was a big flip to go, oh, wait, I can have butter, avocado, like this chicken skin. That was like unheard of at the time. The egg yolk even.
right.
All these things that were like, well, that's fat, so it's calories.
So what were some of the sugars that you were surprised by? Things in fruit?
Like honeys and dried fruits, I would say.
Okay.
Like those sorts of things that are wholesome,
Yeah.
you know, but like a breakfast with like honey on toast is just, I would never have that like right now.
Right. Yeah, what's your advice for sugar in those, the healthier sources from dried fruits? Would you say just use them sparingly or?
Yeah, it's still sugar. So I think that's a really important thing. It's great that it's more, I guess, wholesome, more closer to nature. But I would still approach it as a treat or a dessert. So, you know, Manuka honey I think is a little bit different because it's quite medicinal.
Right.
That's the one I'm like don't mind, but
That's why
something
it's
like a
$50
coconut
on the shelf.
something like a coconut sugar or like whatever these millions of types of kind of wholesome sugars are. Like I still use them occasionally, but I would use them in a birthday cake, you know, not in breakfast pancakes or in my lunch, you know.
Yes.
So yeah, that's sort of my advice on sugar is to still treat it as that's a treat.
Sure. And should you be mindful of the spike it's going to have in your insulin?
Yes. And again, insulin's an interesting one because everyone's different. Like I'm highly sensitive to sugar where I have a big insulin response. So for people listening, insulin is the hormone that regulates your blood sugar. So if it's too high, it's insulin's role to make it lower or to recognize that it's too high, and as goes for when it's too low. So people with diabetes, that mechanism doesn't work regardless of what type of diabetes they have. So that's why they have to take insulin because their body doesn't have that ability to, if their blood sugar drops, to manage that or if it gets too high. Gotcha. Whereas people without that, we have that. And our body makes sure that our blood glucose stays within a very sort of like small window for our health. So it's really interesting that that's being spoken about now, insulin, which I feel like previously was only spoken about with relationship to diabetes, whereas now it's been spoken about with just general health.
Everyone.
So, and also it's one of those things where we see how kind of detrimental that old school advice was, which was largely like have 8 serves of carbohydrates a day.
Yeah.
Kind of, it's almost this grazing, which is like, I mean, how can you have 8 serves of carbohydrates a day?
Yeah, what's that about?
Grains as well.
Wow.
I'll tell you what it's about is that when those recommendations were made, they were largely influenced by the food industry, so Kellogg's.
Right.
And unfortunately, the powerful companies that fund this stuff.
They're the ones that pay for the studies.
So, you know, suddenly like bacon and eggs, which was a normal breakfast.
Yeah.
Bacon and eggs and homemade bread became cornflakes and whatever else Kellogg sells.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me, actually. Yeah.
So, you know, we've had that advice, which, you know, the fact that it was biased is a whole other issue. But, you know, people follow that. People are trying to do what they can to be healthy. And they're kind of like just eating carbohydrates all day and having an insulin response all day. And your insulin, for some people that are sensitive, just is too high all the time, basically.
Right.
Never has a chance to drop.
Okay.
Which is really important. So, and that can lead to insulin resistance, which is a precursor to diabetes, but it's also just like I was bordering on insulin resistance, you know, even though I wasn't overweight or anything, but interestingly, I did way more than I did now, even though I was eating less.
Right.
But because when your insulin is high, you cannot lose weight.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And does it impact your energy as well?
Yeah, definitely. And your hunger levels and everything. Yeah.
So on your TikTok, you'll see that you are low carb. So how does that look for you? Will you have bread during the day or?
Yeah. So across like the journey of my health and life, it's looked different, which I think is important. Like, and it's a nice thing that like you kind of eat the way that like is right for you in the moment, but that is going to change as your life changes and as you get old. So initially when I discovered this, which was about 8 years ago, and I kind of had an inkling that something was a bit off because I was such a healthy eater and I really did not eat much because I was self-conscious about my weight, which I think a lot of people can relate to.
Right, yeah.
And I wasn't overweight, but I still was very self-conscious about it. So I kind of knew, I was like, it doesn't make sense. And you look at other people and you're like, I swear you eat so much more than me and like you like are naturally much slimmer than me. And so when I started looking into this and I got told that I was like kind of like erring towards insulin resistance, or my insulin, I would benefit from like lowering that. I went on the big journey, of course, of using diet to change that. So the obvious answer there is like what causes an insulin spike is carbohydrates. Stop eating carbohydrates. And it was that simple.
Right.
So I did, but I went quite extreme. Like had no carbohydrates.
Sure.
Which I think I needed at the time to like treat it almost. Like I almost used like a really strict no carbohydrate diet. Not no carbohydrate, very low, I'd say, like a keto diet.
Yep.
I use that as medication almost. Like, you know, so I don't see it as a bad thing. It was what I needed to do. And then all of a sudden, after about maybe 2 years, I felt different. And I was like, wanted more carbohydrates and felt like I could handle it and started to experiment with having more. And then I could, and I found my balance there. But I still now, like that many years later, it's funny because I don't consider myself a low carb eater. I consider myself someone who eats well and who is mindful of my insulin levels.
Sure.
But compared to 8 serves of grains a day, I am a low carb eater.
Yes, compared to the advice that's been shoveled down our throats in the form of Weet Bix.
Yes, exactly. But I do eat carbohydrates. But yeah, I don't have 8 serves of grains a day. I have them more, so I skew them more to the end of the day.
Okay.
Which again is the opposite of what we used to be told.
Yeah.
And not with every meal.
Okay.
That's basically the extent of what I do now.
Do you eat bread?
Occasionally.
Sure.
But it's not maybe like once every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And it has to be sourdough.
That's what I was going to ask next. Yeah. Do you have a preference for bread?
Definitely
sourdough.
a sourdough.
Yeah. My bread journey was trying to get something as close to the grain.
Your bread journey.
That's what this episode's called.
Everyone has a bread journey.
Yeah, my bread journey. And I have this conversation with Zoe because she loves her bread and her theory is that if there's no bread on her eggs and avo, she's going to be left hungry. So we've been on a mission to find the best bread. So I'm glad you say sourdough because that's what we've settled on.
Yeah. And that, just because I don't eat it much doesn't mean that it doesn't work for other people. Like my partner asks me this all the time because he has bread almost every day. But he's also very mindful in that he doesn't have wheat for his other meals. And that's a difference. It's like if you're having Wheat Bix for breakfast, bread for lunch, and then pasta for dinner, you're having the bulk of your diet is wheat.
You're getting that 8 serves. Yeah.
If you're having other things, even if they are carbohydrates and bread is with one of your meals and that's the wheat that you have, like that is totally fine. And he's much more active. He's naturally very, very lean. And I always say to him, and he has like less opportunities to eat throughout the day. He's very busy. So I'm like, no, you need a carbohydrate. You need a really like good, solid meal. Whereas I don't need that. I need a bit of protein and like a more decent amount of fat.
Interesting.
And I've got like bursting energy. If I have bread in the morning, I feel sluggish. I want to go to sleep. So again, like it's really important that bio-individuality, like, and where you sit.
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
It comes back to that experimenting, right?
Exactly.
Working out what makes you feel good and just finding joy in that, in the freedom of trying new things. And while we are on the topic of eliminating things from the diet, there's a lot of talk at the moment around seed oils and why we should stay away. Can you please describe briefly what seed oils are and why we should avoid them?
Yeah, so seed oils, or you might hear them called as, you might hear them referred to as industrial seed oils, which I think is an interesting distinction because the industrial part is actually the problem.
Right.
So these are a very new addition to the human diet, which have really like skewed the levels of what we're consuming in more recent times. And what these seed oils were. So before they were invented, the fat that people ate was the fat that they had access to. So there was some from plant fats, so nuts and avocados and olive oil, of course, a very traditional one, particularly in the Mediterranean cultures. And the other fats were saturated fats and animal fats. So butter, lard, pork fat, tallow, which is from beef, and all those traditional foods. And so that was what we cooked in, and in island cultures, the coconut fat as well is what they had access to, which is saturated fat, which has now become very normal for non-island cultures like ourselves.
Of course.
Then all of a sudden, so these industrial seed oils are made from like canola plants, rapeseed, which I think is the same thing. What else? The other one, sunflower seed. Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of different ones, unfortunately. And also vegetable oil.
Right.
Which is a great marketing label because vegetable oil is canola oil. But they call it vegetable oil because it's kind of this like broad name that can just mean many different things and it kind of appears to be healthy.
Yes, yeah.
Which is crazy.
Misusing that vegetable word.
It's like, oh, vegetable, okay.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I don't think that lasted, but that is another seed oil. These were originally invented to oil machinery.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then it was later discovered that you can consume them, although I would argue you can't consume them safely. Like they should be used on machinery, but they're very, very cheap to produce. So then you've got all the food manufacturers who are using traditional fats in their food. So it might be beef tallow and some of the really old, like even conventional processed foods we know today did used to use traditional fats. They're going, of course, they're a business, like any business. They go, hey, we can swap out the butter in our cookies or the tallow in this or whatever it is for canola oil, and you literally save your costs by 90%. So they all did it, of course.
Yeah.
And then what happens is the food supply, like suddenly has got a massive shift in the kind of fat that is in, and because people eat a lot of processed food, if you, or most people do, not if you're a bit more progressed, like a large part of your kind of fat consumption has now changed, or the population level. So a big issue with these is that they're high in omega-6s. So it can throw off your ratios of omega-3 to 6.
Okay.
I come back to a more simplified approach, which is that this is a non-food item. And so it really shouldn't be in your diet. So, and there's like some research, this is why it's quite controversial, because there are some people that are completely anti it. And then there are some people that goes, well, there's no research to prove that it's causes any issues. But like we were chatting about in the beginning, research is limited. And so I come back to like, what is the information that I have? Like, let's use a bit of common sense, which is that this is a non-food item. The reason why it's available is because it's cheap. It's nothing to do with your health or anything. The reason why companies use it is because it's cheap and it's better for their profit margins. So is it because, did they make that decision because of your health? No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I doubt the cookie manufacturer really cared about your health.
No, they want to sell more and they want their products to be more shelf stable and they want to make more money. So I'm like, okay, that information and the fact that it's like a non-food ingredient tells me like this is something to avoid. And so then the next step is to come back to reality. They are in almost everything. And once you start looking at packaged foods, you'll see them everywhere. Okay, what can we do there? We can cook at home as much as possible. You can get them out of your home, which is what I recommend to anyone to do, because I'm kind of all about control what you can control. So have good fats in your home and cook at home as much as possible. You're pretty good. You'll have a little bit when you're out here and there. And you want fried potato chips. I have those too when I'm out sometimes. But if that's just a small portion, you're totally fine. And they are used in restaurants, majority of restaurants.
Right.
Again, it's cheaper.
Yeah. So even in the healthy restaurants.
Some that are really, really like, what's the word, committed to health and are willing to sacrifice their profits, they won't use seed oils. But that actually is not the majority. The majority, it is cheaper. And so they still will use them. So I'm like, control what you can control. I still like to go to restaurants and eat out with my friends and family. So I'm not going to give up eating at restaurants. I'm just going to do the best I can. And like with that, I would say 95% of what I eat has no seed oils in it. And that's a good thing to aim for. So yeah.
And what's the difference between seed oils and olive oil? Is it in the way it's made or extracted?
So olive oil is actually an olive is a fruit. So the oil comes from the flesh of the fruit rather than the seed.
Okay.
So it's, to simplify, it's like a heavily industrialized process to get the oil out of these seeds.
Right.
And it's got to be deodorized and it's got to go through all these sort of processes. And then they go rancid easily because you've got this kind of like unstable fat sitting on the shelves, sitting in a plastic bottle. It's just not good.
It's not good, okay.
Whereas olive oil, a good one, olive oil is actually kind of like olive juice because it's from the flesh.
Right.
It's stored in a dark glass bottle, which is much better than a big plastic bottle of this rancid oil that sits on the shelves for years and years and years.
Just looks bad, doesn't it? It's like, remember that sitting in the cupboard at home and it would stick to everything. It's just nasty stuff.
Yeah.
Not good. What about, you mentioned tallow. So me and Zoe obsessed with, I actually got it, but she's stolen it and she's using it now. It's beef tallow that they've put essential oil in it and have bought it as a moisturizer and rub it on your face before bed. And we both wake up look at each other's skin and go, whoa, it looks so fresh and nourished. And we just can't believe the simplicity of beef tallow. It's fat from the liver of a cow or the kidney of a cow.
It can be from like anywhere in the cow. It's like the fat that comes from the cow, basically. Like if you cook a really fatty piece of meat, the fat that comes off of there. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever cook with tallow or?
I also just got into using it as skincare.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Only recently. I don't cook with it, mainly because I just don't have it.
Well, we were away on the weekend and we didn't have any olive oil. So we're like, I wonder if we could put that tallow on the pan.
Probably not with essential oils.
Not with the essential oils. That's
but I do sometimes, like if I make a chicken stock, I skim the fat off once it's been in the fridge, and I do use that in cooking.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So, which is the same thing. That's just the chicken fat version.
Right.
Which is also a traditional food. Like I'm Jewish, so like matzo ball soup is like a really common traditional food in the Jewish culture, but one of the key ingredients is chicken fat.
Oh, wow.
Which makes it really delicious. Yeah. And it turns out that was actually like, your like traditional wisdom that was like, this is a good kind of food to have.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so I'm really pro that. Certainly for skincare. I also like have tried to get rid of kind of the toxic products in cleaning and definitely in like, your home and self-care products.
Yeah, sure.
And same thing, it's a simplicity. Like you look at these products and I've never been really into skincare anyway. So I'm like, I don't have that many things, but it makes sense to me. And it aligns with my philosophies of food as well, which is like whole food.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you just realize that how scammed we've been with all of the skincare products. Back to olive oil. Do you encourage any limits around how much we can use it, or we can put it on everything? Is there any sort of limit?
Of course there's like a natural limit to everything. Like nothing can just be consumed in like extreme excess. And I always like to come back to having a really almost spiritual connection with food. You don't overconsume it because you're like, wow, I'm so grateful for this food that I have in abundance, like what we have access to now. And then you enjoy it and you don't like shovel it down while you're distracted. And so I always find that's like a natural kind of portion control element because you just don't overconsume when you're in a calm state and you're like grateful for this food.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I always get a little bit of, I don't know, the TikTok commenters like love the fact that or maybe hate the fact that I just douse my food in olive oil and don't measure it.
Are you just trolling them by this point?
A little bit.
Come on, guys. Come at me.
It's twofold. Partly is that's generally what I believe. I don't believe you need to count calories. You need to be mindful of what food you're eating. Another part of it is that I do eat mostly low carb. And I feel really good on a low carb diet with higher fat. Again, I don't consider it low carb or high fat. I consider it eating well.
Yeah.
But compared to, I do understand that people need a kind of definition. And so my health outcomes are a lot determined by my insulin levels, and that's what I focus on, which means I manage the sugar in my diet and I manage the carbohydrates. Everything else, I make sure to eat protein, fat. I just don't need to measure. I don't need to count. Now, I don't drink a cup of olive oil with my food, but when I'm drizzling it over, I love the taste of it. And I know that like it's pretty hard to kind of overdo it without the food being gross, like just too oily.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, that's my philosophy with that. And then another reason why I try to show people that is because I was that girl who was like, no, like I don't have oil on my salads and I won't have oil because I was terrified of the calories. And I'm like, I just want like young girls to see that you don't need to be that way. And you also don't need to sacrifice feeling good physically and feeling like you look good. Like I think, that's maybe a bit of a statement that gets a lot of people cancelled these days is like, but yeah, like it's okay to want to look good and maintain a certain weight and feel good and feel light and feel healthy. Like that is perfectly okay. It's okay not to want to be overweight. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with anyone who is overweight, but it's okay that for you don't feel good like that. But you don't need to have this like hectic gym, low fat, calorie controlled, calorie counted diet to do that. So I want to show people that like you can enjoy cooking, and it's such an interesting point because I love cooking, and I've got a husband and 2 stepkids and I cook for them. I cook for family. I don't want to cook a meal for us and be like, well, I have to measure all the calories that go in and then weigh what I'm eating, or the alternative, which is I've got to cook them something that's really delicious and has no measurements. And then for me, I've got to have some like calorie controlled meal. Like I don't want to live like that, and you don't need to. So that's what I want to show people. Like you really can have the best of both worlds.
Well, I think you are. You're doing such a good job on your TikTok. Highly recommend checking it out if you're listening. I love what you said about when you're eating and enjoying the abundance of the food and becoming present while you're eating that. And it's something that I try to do as well. But do you see food as energy like that? Do you think it's important to kind of eat something and not only consider like how that food's going to give you energy to move around, but taking on the spiritual properties of the food?
It's absolutely how I see it. So, and that's what motivates me to eat well, basically most of the time is that you are taking in energy, and I'm not talking about calories energy. I'm like spiritual energy, and even scientifically that's what's happening. You know, like the sun grows food, whether that's animal or plant, and then you take in that food, and then that food quite literally becomes you. Like the amino acids get broken down, become your muscles and your tendons and everything that needs to be done. The vitamins and minerals are all used in your body. Like that's actually what happens. Like you legitimately, that food is becoming you. So what is I use the word vibe, which I know like a lot of people won't relate to, but I know a lot of people will. Like what is the vibe of that food? It's not just about the calories. Like that's so important. And it is a bit progressive, and I think for some people maybe a bit hard to get your head around. But yes, absolutely, I see it that way. And when I did kind of make that shift, and also kind of being like, what do I feel like is my best, most like aligned, highest self? What food matches that person? I want to eat that, you know? And you do start to see these pockets where when you feel really down about yourself, when your self-worth is really low, you eat shit because you're kind of eating the food that's on par with how you feel. And so, yeah, this is all where it gets like interestingly complex. That there is, when I say there is so much more to food than its macros and calories, it's all of this.
So interesting, yeah. Yeah, it's a cyclical thing where if you're feeling shit, you'll choose poor foods. If you're feeling great, you'll choose food that mirrors that empowerment.
Yeah, exactly.
So how does that look? If you're feeling great, you want to eat a high vibe food, what would that be for you?
So it's choosing really good quality animal foods. And that I can see, like if I go to Coles and I look at like all the meat that's there and it's like plastic wrapping, to me it's low vibe.
Yeah.
And I apologize for coming across like, I don't know, too kind of like sanctimonious, but
just a food hippie.
Yeah. But that is truly how I feel. I'm like, I can't bring myself to consume that. You know, I'm just like, I know it's like bad vibes, you know, whereas the stuff that I get that's pasture raised, organic, like it may also be in a plastic container, but I'm like, that is like rich and nourishing. Yeah. So that's a big part of where I see it. And it kind of comes back to what I said before about like organic, which is that is probably like the most important place to look at quality. And then same with fruits and vegetables. Like I make as much of an effort as possible to shop at the farmer's market.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, that's like, it's just you've got a closer relationship to, and it's such a simple swap. You know, like I can't suddenly move to a farm and homestead and grow all my own stuff. Like it's not realistic for me as for most people, but that like can definitely do that, like prioritize shopping at the farmer's market. And it does feel so much better to like buy that produce. It also tastes better, which is a bonus.
Yep.
And it's got less pesticides and less of the nasty things that you don't want anyway.
I've heard you talk about four foods that we should avoid. I believe the seed oils were one of those. What would the other three be?
Yeah, seed oils was one. Sugar is another one. Yep. The other one is low quality animal foods. And the last one, which is more grey, so I kind of want to be careful, is wheat. Because I do believe that wheat can be a part of a healthy diet and a whole foods diet, depending on your kind of constitution and how it goes within you. But it's very important on quality. And I believe that the way wheat is eaten now, which is for every meal, in a really like processed white flour version, is not supportive of your health. So I kind of, the reason I made that list of 4 things is because I'm really trying to simplify it for people.
Right.
And it is simple. Like I believe it's simple. So if someone asks me what I do, that is what I focus on. I avoid those 4 things. Then I look for one ingredient foods. I try to do that 95% of the time. That's it. Like that is it. I can go into all the other things. Like I try and have protein in every meal and I eat not too many carbohydrates and all that stuff, but that's like not that important. The more important things, like if you can do all that, and most people don't do those things, doesn't matter what you're eating within that, like you're eating well. So yeah, that's why I've got that list. And that is legitimate. Like those are the things that I personally avoid, with the exception of wheat. Like I do buy sourdough and we do have sourdough pizza.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I don't buy like your typical like wraps and your typical pastas and stuff. Yeah.
They seem quite processed, those wraps, don't they?
Yeah.
You know when it feels rubbery and it's like hard to separate and it's just...
The one that is okay is the mountain bread wraps.
Okay.
Those are the only ones I've seen that are decent. Everyone else, all the other ones, I just like you look at the ingredients and it's got a paragraph of things.
Yes, yeah, that's right. I had one the other night and surprise, surprise, had a really poor sleep. I've been tracking my sleep because I've had... my Garmin watch is like a blessing and a curse. It's telling me that I'm having these really restless sleeps and tossing and turning during the night. So I'm trying to work out where that's coming from. The thing I'm focusing on the moment is replacing red meat with fish at night. And I've had some good results.
Yeah.
Does that stack up?
Yeah, possibly. It's much easier to digest.
If someone was saying that they're not sleeping well, are there any other foods that might contribute to a poor night's sleep?
Eating too little can definitely make it hard to sleep. And sometimes like an extreme low carb diet can do that. That's why I said I have carbohydrates at night because it supports my sleep.
Oh, right.
And I also do that depending on where my cycle is at. There are some parts of my monthly cycle where I need more and some where I don't. Poor sleep, sugar for sure, because you kind of like give yourself this energy spike like when you're meant to be winding down. Eating late as well for some people because you're still digesting. So if you can stop eating 2 hours before bed, you're in a better state and probably not having like a really big meal. Caffeine certainly affects your sleep. So, I mean, I love coffee. Like you don't need to give up caffeine, and everyone's a different level of caffeine metabolizer.
Okay.
So for some people can have a coffee at night and go to sleep. I could never.
That's my mum.
So
I do not know how she does it.
I could never. So I stop. The latest I'll have coffee is 12.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's for my sleep as well. The one other thing for sleep, alcohol. Alcohol does affect your sleep. And that's quite an interesting one because you kind of think it knocks you out, which a lot of people think.
Yeah.
But it does, but it doesn't give you the deep sleep that you want.
It just knocks you out into a light sleep for the whole night.
Yeah, the research shows even if it puts you to sleep, it's not good quality sleep if you've had alcohol. Whereas if you haven't, you're more likely to get that deep quality sleep.
The wearables are really good for that as well, the alcohol tracking. I think the sleep tracking. I think a lot of people are seeing the correlation between their drinking and their sleep. And once you can see those results, it's the best way to make change.
It's hard to unsee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coffee's going to be the next one that I approach if the fish doesn't work. But I'm having one cup first thing in the morning. Well, not the first thing, but early in the day. And I don't know if that's contributing.
That's fine. No. The other thing I was going to say is blue light.
Yes.
Yeah. So I wear red glasses at night.
Me too. So stylish.
Look at you.
Yeah.
And I find that makes such a difference. Like I find I'm getting much tired because I also like, I consider myself a really energized person. So even at 8 p.m. at night, like I'm like full of energy. You know, I do have that where I'm like, oh, it's like hard for me to think about going to sleep right now because I'm like full of energy.
Yeah.
I think it's because I eat so well, but but the red glasses have really helped.
Yeah,
and
that's cool.
Yeah, which is a circadian rhythm thing, which is that we have access to all this blue light, which does prevents you from producing melatonin, which helps us sleep. A lot of people say it's BS. But I think the research is there and I certainly have felt the difference.
It worked for me as well.
Yeah.
It reminded me of, when you go on a camping trip and you get so tired at night. And
it's like 6 p.m.
It's 6 p.m. And I guess it's because you're not getting all of the lights in. Yeah. And that's what it felt like for me one night wearing these glasses. And I did sleep really well.
Isn't it crazy to think like in our normal lives, because we're like looking at screens all the time, like you just completely have none of that. And then you go camping, you don't have it for 24 hours. And it's like completely changed
straight away.
System.
Yeah. You're comfortable in a relationship where we're wearing red glasses around the house.
My partner, he's used to all this stuff. I tape my mouth shut at night. He is like, he's very accustomed to like me being weird. But
the 2-hour sleep routine where you're taping the mouth, red glasses on.
He says I look like Elton John when I wear those glasses at night. Yeah.
On to another polarizing one. What's your thought on milks? Alt milks, and what milk do you drink if you drink milk?
It's a pretty simple response, which is that my only issue with the milks is the seed oils.
Okay.
Aside from the seed oils, I mean, have whatever milk you like. I really don't mind. I think different things work for different people. But the problem is I'd say majority of the alternative milks, especially the ones in a Tetra Pak, which is like that square thing.
Yeah.
Not all, but most of them contain seed oils, and that is because that an oil in water, if you blend it, it emulsifies. It makes a creamy liquid.
Right.
So if you've ever made almond milk or oat milk, it separates and it's very watery.
Okay.
So for barista, does not work at all in coffee. So that's why these shitty kind of milk alternatives were made, because they pump them with seed oils and other things that make them taste like this beautiful, delicious, creamy thing.
Right. Interesting.
But again, coming back to that, they've done that for financial benefit. Like, cool, we can make a milk that tastes like the real thing by pumping it with all this stuff, calling it almond milk or almond drink, whatever they call it.
Yeah.
And then it just flies off the shelves.
Right.
And for the businesses as well, it's shelf stable. So whereas a fresh almond milk lasts 3 days max and then it's out, which doesn't work for a lot of cafes and things. So I would say my kind of conclusion is stay away from the alternative milks with seed oils. So look for sunflower oil, canola oil, rapeseed oil in the ingredients. If it doesn't have those, which some do, which is great, have those if you like. Like the Nutty Bruce almond milk doesn't. Another one is Mandalay Orchard, which is an almond milk that doesn't have seed oils. An oat milk that's great is OMG milk.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a blue one. That is, I'm pretty sure, the only oat milk, maybe even globally, that doesn't have seed oils in it.
So you got to be the person going up to the barista and saying, "Do you have this OMG milk?"
I totally am that person. And then there's nothing wrong with dairy milk. I truly believe that. Bring back regular dairy milk. So if I'm out, I won't if I know that they use a good milk, I'll have good almond milk. I'll have that. If I don't, I either have it black or I have it with regular milk, just a piccolo with regular milk.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm for some people, I think they love regular milk coffee and they feel like they've had to change to a non-dairy alternative. And I'm you don't just keep, but I don't it doesn't taste the same. I'm just keep drinking your regular milk, and seed oils is one of those things like I said, it's hard to avoid entirely, especially if you want to go to restaurants and live a relatively normal life. But I do think that daily things, your coffee and your whatever milk you have is something you're having daily, that avoid it there.
Because it adds up. It accumulates over time.
If you're having fries on the weekend when you're out once in a while, fine. But your coffee is something you have every day. So yeah.
Make those daily habits the best you can.
Exactly. Control what you can control.
Yeah. Is seed oils one of the reasons you suggest avoiding the health food aisle?
Definitely.
Really?
Definitely one of them. If you haven't realized by now, I just have a real I think unfortunately and I'm potentially part of this problem as well, but marketing has just really skewed real health advice. The health food aisle is just an example of whatever is trending at the time. Every company just going, awesome, let's just slap that on the label, and make a product that says no sugar, no fat, no whatever it is. And
one of the latest ones is protein, a high protein bar. Or
a high protein Snickers bar.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Mars released. But again, it's I'm oh my God, people have lost their minds. So, and like I said, I come back to simple whole foods. Some of these products have got a team of 50 marketing team of 50 producing all this content and all this stuff and all this research. Then you've got apples and pears, organic apples and pears sitting at the farmer's market. And I'm they don't have a marketing team of 20. Yeah. So the information you're getting is kind of skewed. That's why, again,
that's such a good point.
That's why I do what I do, because I'm okay, I know an organic apple doesn't have some amazing
PR company behind
package and some cool celebrity promoting it, and it doesn't have it's not sitting on the aisle with this colorful packaging. But yeah, so that's why. And I think the majority of the stuff in the health food aisle is I wouldn't eat any of it because it's all got sugar in it. It's all got seed oils in it. Yeah.
It needs to have a really long shelf life, and It's almost like desserts that are marketed as snacks.
Exactly.
'Cause they're like very heavy in sugar.
And it's got to make a profit. So for those, it's another thing that, and guys, I buy products. Like, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
I purchase things from businesses, but it's still like, those health claims are not because the founder is like unbelievably like passionate about your personal health. Like, that company is probably owned by another bigger company. Mars, for example, like, and they've gone, we need to get into the health food aisle. Like, let's make this wholesome other brand. And it's a business,
They've
gone,
the business of making tasty food.
And they're like, what sells? If it says no sugar on the label, it sells. If it says no fat on the label, it sells. If it says high protein on the label, it sells. And like, you guys are smarter than that,
Yeah, it's such
like
a great
if
point.
something's got like, if it's a chocolate bar with like 5 grams of protein, you can eat a couple of eggs, and that's better, more bioavailable, healthier protein for you. So yeah.
Yeah, do you avoid protein powders as well, speaking of that?
No, I don't mind protein powders, but I don't think they're a substitute for animal protein.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think they're a nice addition. But again, most of them I think are not very good. But I don't mind. Like, the one that I do like is Bear Blends.
Okay.
It's a really like just beautiful, very simple, very clean protein. Yeah. And they've got a plant option and a whey option.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I'll get killed if I don't ask you what your day on a plate looks like.
Yeah, I'll answer for like now, currently, what I'm eating. So it can change, like depending on what my life is doing and how busy I am. But kind of in this season of my life, like this sort of year or so, this is what I'm eating. I wake up, I have a big glass of water, filtered water with Celtic sea salt in it to mineralize the water, mineralize the body. And I'm just someone who like has a lot of fluid retention and needs a lot of lymphatic drainage. So like proper hydration is really important to me. That's what I do. Then sometime later I'll have my coffee, which I didn't know is different to a lot of nutritionists. They say don't have coffee until you've had breakfast. Most of the time I feel totally fine with it. At the moment, my coffee order used to always be an almond milk latte with a good almond milk with no seed oils. But at the moment, for some reason, even though it's freezing, I want it iced with whole milk and with collagen in it. So that is what I'm having at the moment. I don't know why I'm having iced coffee right now.
Maybe you're just diving into the ice bath routine in a different form.
Maybe. But yeah, it will be one of those. It'll be either an almond latte. I generally make my coffee at home or I have it iced with regular milk. And I have collagen in both of those. Breakfast is always 3 eggs, some version of 3 eggs. So sometimes it can just be literally 3 scrambled eggs cooked in a bit of butter. Sometimes I go more crazy and I add avocado and tomatoes and basil, and it just really depends on what I have and how much time I have and what I feel like. So it'll be any version of that. And yeah, if I cook it, if I do scrambled, I'll cook it in butter. And if I do boiled sometimes, I'll put olive oil on it. So, and I use this olive oil called Mount Zero, and it's the best tasting olive oil. So I love that.
Where do you find that?
I get it online from Wholesome Market.
Okay.
I think you can get it at Harris Farm.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
I love that olive oil. And you'll taste it. It's just like out of this world. That's my morning. My lunch is probably the meal that I change the most. Oh, it can be any number of different things. Like sometimes I love the seed crackers, like all seed crackers. Sometimes I'll have those with like avocado and tomato or cheese, ricotta and herbs, cucumbers, tahini I love. I sometimes make a little snack plate like that. Or I'll have leftovers, which can be cooked fish. It normally probably is like something fishy that I have at lunch. Either it's like leftover salmon or I have canned fish, which I love.
Yeah.
From a company called Good Fish.
Is that tuna or?
Any. I switch it up. Tuna or mackerel probably is normally my picks. And I just make sure to get one in olive oil because canned fish is another thing where it's often in seed oils and canola oil.
Really? Right.
And I make, as long as it's got like some form of protein, veggies, that's kind of the extent of it. I'm not a huge snacker. I'll have a little bit of fruit and nuts in the afternoon. Whatever I have, I'm loving oranges at the moment. So I have oranges and some roasted almonds. And then my dinner, I change up my dinners a lot, but it always follows the same format, which is like some kind of protein, anything good quality. Sometimes it's sausages, sometimes it's fish, sometimes it's prawns, sometimes it's slow cooked lamb, any kind of protein, whatever I've made, some kind of carbohydrate. Sweet potato and regular potato is probably my normal. That's what I like the most. And then some kind of green. So it can be broccoli, like a salad, some kind of leafy green there. That's it. And then I have dark chocolate.
I was going to say, yeah, do you have a little sweet tooth?
Yeah, I do. After dinner, I love dark chocolate, like a really, really dark one.
Or were you talking 80%?
Yes, 85 or more.
Brilliant.
I also spread it with almond butter and a bit of sea salt. I love that. And then I also have just Greek yogurt, like full fat Greek yogurt. And then I get organic berries, like frozen berries, and I heat them in the microwave. So it makes like a warm berry syrupy thing. And I just put that on the yogurt.
Genius.
It's
Brilliant.
really good.
I'll have to steal that for sure.
Yeah, that's a typical day where I'm like, you know, I've got time, I've got groceries. But there are certainly days where like I have potato chips, the olive oil potato chips though.
Yeah, right. You're not crazy.
And chocolate for lunch. Like I'm not, you know, I don't want to come across like every day I eat like la-di-da.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Cooking these home-cooked meals.
Yeah.
Like that, but that would be a day, that is most days where I'm like more planned. Yeah. But sometimes, you know, sometimes if I'm out just like for lunch, I get a packet of biltong and I eat that with an apple. Like, and that's just all that I can manage at the time. So it's certainly not always perfect, but I definitely always try as much as I can.
That's it. As long as you're trying most of the time, you're getting it 90% of the time right. Exactly. Let yourself off the hook for those times where you don't, or else you just drive yourself crazy.
Yeah. And I've come to kind of like find my little like tips and tricks. Like I know if I'm in a pinch and I've got nothing on me, what I go and get. It's just like a bit of fruit. Sometimes even those like squeezed Greek yogurt pouches, a packet of nuts, and a bit of biltong. The barbell one is the one that I love, which you can get at Woolies. So it's kind of like wherever I am, I can find that.
Yeah, okay, nice.
And that's what I do. So yeah.
Do you how do you find the social media part of your job? Do you enjoy making videos, or do you struggle for inspiration, or does it all happen pretty organically?
Definitely up and down. You know, I do wonder if I didn't use social media for work, if I would use it at all. I kind of sometimes have these dreams where I'm like, I just would love to like never have these apps on my phone. Like I definitely feel that because there's of course like negatives.
Do you ever look at your partner and think, oh man, it'd be cool if I didn't have to rely on that? He doesn't have any.
He doesn't have the apps. He doesn't like, and I'm like, oh God.
Raw dogging it.
Yeah, sometimes I just would love to do that. At the same time, I really appreciate the kind of like opportunities that it's given me, like in terms of my work. So I have very strict boundaries. Like I've set app limits.
Okay.
Which I just recommend to anyone and everyone, regardless of if you work in social media or not, is to have those limits on because it is so addictive. Like, and it's funny because I used to educate on the same stuff with sugar. I'm like, it's so addictive. Like it's not in your control. That's why you need to get over the addiction.
Interesting.
It's the same with social media. Like it is near impossible to like override that for even adults. When it comes to teenagers, I'm just like, oh my God, you poor things, because it's even harder. But even adults, so it locks me out. Like after I have very, very, very strict limits where I only post Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays.
Okay. So
on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which are the days I don't post, it locks me out after 5 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very clever.
And it's a really good like mental thing that you do with yourself because you can override it. You can go ignore limit.
Yes, yeah.
But I'm like, I'm really conscious of my time, you know, and I like to like, if I take like a really big view of my life, I go, what is like the bulk of my time spent on? And like, I always think about that when I get that where it's like, you cannot use Instagram anymore. I'm like, okay, I know I don't need to do it for work right now, because it's also easy to get into that trap where you're like, well, it's my work, so I need to find inspiration. I'm like, no, I need to be honest with myself here. Like I don't need to use it today. Anything that I need to see, I can see it tomorrow, you know?
That's very clever.
Yeah, so I'm very like firm on those. But I've just, you know, and I haven't always nailed how to use social media in terms of managing my mental health and my well-being. but I've been doing it for a long time. So I feel like I'm getting pretty close, and I certainly try. And so I don't I know what I feel comfortable with, which is that I don't like show my personal life. I use that as context for my content, you know? So I might be like, oh, this is what I'm cooking for me and my husband or me and my stepkids, or I was in a rush this morning and this is all I had, or I ran out of groceries. And so I use my personal life as context, and I go, this is what I like because of this. And I'm always honest, like with what I feel honest about. But I don't like go, this is what I did today. And like, I don't ever film content outside of my kitchen and home because that's my personal time. I don't ever film socializing. Like, even if it's like would get views or is like relevant to like when I'm eating or something, that's just a boundary. If I'm not working, if I'm with friends or my partner, it is not content time. Like it is. So I have that really firm distinction. And I'm willing to sacrifice like growth or fame or whatever comes with filming your everyday life. And I'm like, this is where my boundaries are. So this is where I still want to share what I'm doing. I want to share a message. Like I've got a real big mission behind that. And I can do that with the kind of content that I film. And I feel comfortable filming myself making breakfast. It's super awkward, but I'm like, this doesn't affect my mental health, you know, and I can make myself enjoy it. But I'm like, yeah, if I've got to vlog my day or film myself with my friends or like, no.
I think that's such a conscious way to look at it because, you might not be the lifestyle influencer, but what it allows you to do is focus on what your mission is, which is to empower people with their health and nutrition decisions.
Yeah. And I've got like, I use a newsletter. So that's a big part of my content sort of plan. And there I feel more comfortable to write about things that are more personal to me and maybe mental health things that I'm going through or getting married or something like that. But I definitely don't feel comfortable when I've had a hard time. You know, it's different places where you feel comfortable. I think that's really important, but it's really unnatural for me to get on my Instagram story and film myself crying, which some younger people do. I'm like, I'm just never going to do that.
I had the seed oils today.
But it's tough. Like, it's such a beast, social media.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Yeah, because there's a million different ways you can take it, but you've got to be conscious with how you're using it and what your mission is.
Yeah, and it's really important to me creatively. But if I'm on it all the time, like looking at what everyone else is doing, I've got no creativity because I'm like, my only thing, my brain is what everyone else is posting. Yeah. And then your content becomes like everyone else's.
Yeah,
whereas like the less that I see, or I follow more things that are kind of like unrelated to my industry. Like I don't follow other nutritionists unless they're my friends. I don't follow other dietitians. I don't follow other things, but I might follow some like cake maker in Sweden, you know, because I'm like, I like that inspiration. I like culture, but I don't want to have something that's like directly related to what I do.
So on those days where you're not shooting, is that where you're working on your newsletter and other parts of the business, or are there any exciting projects coming up that you can share with us?
I always have a million things in my brain. One day I want to do a cookbook. So behind the scenes, I'm very, very slowly working on a proposal for that.
Oh, cool.
A book journey is really interesting. I'm learning a lot.
Really?
About a proposal, and it's different to what I've done before. And other than that, I'm just working on building out more clear teaching. So I've got a course which has been really interesting which is called Whole Food Foundations, which I just did to kind of, as the name suggests, like teach the foundations of eating whole foods.
Cool. And can you find that on your website?
Yes, you can. And I avoided doing something like that for a long time because I was like, oh, I don't want to add to the noise and all this stuff. But then I was like, you know, people do trust me, which I kind of like try to palm off. And I'm like, oh, nobody cares about me. And it's that very kind of like self-deprecating energy. But I'm like, no, they actually are interested in what I think. And I do deep down believe that like I can teach them something. And at the very least, I can share my experience, which I think is like, I love hearing anyone else's experience. You don't have to be a perfect, amazing human, but I love hearing people's experiences. And the smallest things can make a huge difference in your life. So I always come back to that and I'm like, you know, and you do get responses sometimes like, wow, this really made me think differently. And I've had so many moments of that in my own life. And I'm like, I hope that I can do that for other people. So I come back to that and I'm like, yeah, that is and then that's why I made this course, because I was like, I need somewhere to kind of like put a step by step. This, if you want to know what I eat and what I believe, it's all here.
Brilliant.
I don't want to be vague where people are like, oh, like what should I do? And I'm like, oh, well, I don't know. I don't want to offend anyone. And I'm like, if you want to know what I think, it's in here.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm sure people are finding tons of value in that, because your TikTok goes amazingly well, but to really understand the process behind your philosophy, the course would be the best place to find that.
Yeah, exactly. And I only launched it a few months ago, and the response was so interesting, because to me it's the most simplest, like basic information. But it was very life-changing for the people that went through it, and they're like, I never thought about it this way, and this is so easy. And I was like, that's all I want. Like, I want you to feel like it's easy. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. And that's the thing with teaching and coaching. Everyone's on a different level. So what might be obvious to you isn't as obvious to someone less progressed down their road, whereas, you know, someone that might be up here for you and you're learning from them. And I think we all have value to give, and someone can learn from where we're at, because everyone's on a different journey. Well, I'm really grateful you came on. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I feel like it was a masterclass. So really appreciate your time here today. And please let the listeners know where they can find you.
Amazing. It was great to chat. I feel like we really got into all the juice. So that was amazing.
Olive oil juice.
Yeah, Instagram and TikTok is where you can find my social stuff, where I'm liv.kaplan with a K, Kaplan. And in there you'll find the links to my newsletter, and that's kind of my deeper communication. So I send one of those out every 2 weeks with my new recipes and anything that's going on. Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm going to subscribe.
Amazing.
Thanks, Liv.
Thanks so much.